Hurricane Helen made landfall in northwestern Florida as a powerful Category 4 storm, bringing catastrophic winds, torrential rains, and life-threatening storm surges to a vast area of the southeastern United States. The hurricane has already claimed at least 3 lives and left over 1.4 million homes and businesses without power across multiple states. The National Hurricane Center in Miami reported that Helen touched down around 11:10 p.m. on Thursday near the mouth of the Osceola River in Florida's Big Bend region. With maximum wind speeds estimated at 140 miles per hour, the hurricane struck just 20 miles northwest of where Hurricane Idalia made landfall last year, causing extensive damage. As Helen moved inland, it triggered hurricane and flash flood warnings extending far beyond the coast, reaching as far as northern Georgia and western North Carolina. The governors of Florida, Georgia, Alabama, North Carolina, and Virginia declared states of emergency in anticipation of the storm's wide-ranging effects. The storm has already resulted in at least 3 fatalities. In Florida, 1 person died when a sign fell on their car. In southern Georgia, 2 people lost their lives when a possible tornado struck a mobile home in Wheeler County, about 70 miles southeast of Macon. Power outages have been widespread, with over 1.2 million customers affected in Florida, more than 190,000 in Georgia, and over 30,000 in the Carolinas, according to the tracking website poweroutage.us. Meteorologists warned of a potentially nightmare storm surge, with predictions of up to 20 feet in some areas, particularly in Apalachee Bay. The National Weather Service described the surge as potentially catastrophic and life-threatening. Even before making landfall, Helen's fury was felt along Florida's western coast, with sustained tropical storm-force winds and hurricane-force gusts. Water overtopped roads in Siesta Key near Sarasota and covered intersections in St. Pete Beach. Outside of Florida, the North Carolina mountains received up to 10 inches of rain, with an additional 14 inches possible. Forecasters predict this could lead to the worst flooding in a century for the region. As Helen moved inland, the risk of tornadoes persisted overnight and into the morning in northern and central Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and southern North Carolina. Virginia was also expected to face tornado risks later on Friday. The storm's impact extended far beyond the coast, with more than a dozen counties in Georgia potentially experiencing hurricane-force winds exceeding 110 miles per hour. Heavy rains began earlier on Thursday in Valdosta, Georgia, near the Florida state line. Mandatory evacuation orders were issued from the Panhandle south along the Gulf Coast, in low-lying areas around Tallahassee, Gainesville, Cedar Key, Lake City, Tampa, and Sarasota. Many residents heeded these warnings, seeking shelter in safer locations. However, some individuals, like commercial fisherman Philip Took, chose to ride out the storm on their boats, citing concerns about losing their livelihoods. The Taylor County Sheriff's Office issued a stark warning to those who decided not to evacuate, advising them to write their names, birth dates, and important information on their bodies with permanent markers for identification purposes. Federal authorities formed search and rescue teams in anticipation of the storm's aftermath. School districts and several universities canceled classes, while airports in Tampa, Tallahassee, and Clearwater closed on Thursday, with widespread cancellations elsewhere in Florida and beyond. The region known as the Forgotten Coast, which has largely escaped widespread condominium development and commercialization, was particularly vulnerable to Helen's impact. The area is beloved for its natural wonders, including vast stretches of salt marshes, tidal pools, and barrier islands. As Helen moves further inland, it is expected to weaken, but still bring destructive winds and heavy rains to the southern Appalachians, potentially causing landslides. Tennessee is among the states expected to experience flooding. Prior to reaching Florida, Hurricane Helen had already caused flooding in parts of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula and knocked out power to over 200,000 homes and businesses in western Cuba. The storm's effects are expected to reach as far as 100 miles north of the Georgia-Florida line, with hurricane conditions anticipated. Georgia opened its parks to evacuees and their pets, including horses, and many cities and counties in southern Georgia implemented overnight curfews. Hurricane Helen is the 8th named storm of the Atlantic hurricane season, which began on June 1st. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration had predicted an above-average hurricane season in the Atlantic this year, due to record-high ocean temperatures. As climate change continues to influence weather patterns, storms like Helen may become more frequent and intense, posing increasing challenges to coastal communities and inland areas alike. The aftermath of this hurricane will likely prompt further discussions about disaster preparedness, infrastructure resilience, and climate adaptation strategies in the affected regions. As Hurricane Helen continues its path of destruction across the southeastern United States, residents and officials brace for the full extent of its impact. The coming days will be crucial for search and rescue efforts, damage assessment, and the beginning of what is likely to be a long and challenging recovery process for the affected communities.